Welcome back to Armageddon 2419 AD, Chapter 11, The New Boss. We had ultrophoned our arrival, and the big boss himself, surrounded by the council, was on hand to welcome us and learn our news. In turn, we were informed that during the night, a band of raiding bad bloods, disguised under the insignia of the Altunas, a gang some distance to the west of us, had destroyed several of our camps before our people had rallied and driven them off. Their purpose, evidently, had been to embroil us with the Altunas, but fortunately, one of our exchanges recognized the bad blood leader who had been slain. The big boss had mobilized the full raiding force of the gang and was on the point of heading an expedition for the extermination of the bad bloods. I looked around the grim circle of the sub-bosses and realized the fate of America at this moment lay in their hands. Their temper demanded the immediate expenditure of our full effort in revenging ourselves for this raid, but the strategic exigencies, to my mind, quite clearly demanded the instant and absolute extermination of the Sinsings. It might be only a matter of hours, for all we knew, before these degraded people would barter clues to the American ultronic secrets to the Hans. How large a force have we? I asked Hart. Every man and maid who can't be spared, he replied. That gives us 700 married and unmarried men, and 300 girls, more than the entire Bad Blood gang. Everyone is equipped with belts, ultrophones, rocket guns, and swords, and all fighting mad. I meditated how I might put the matter of these determined men, and was vaguely conscious that they were awaiting my words. Finally, I began to speak. I do not remember to this day just what I said. I talked calmly, with due regard for their passion, but with deep conviction. I went over the information we had collected, point by point, building my case logically and painting a lurid picture of the danger impending in that half alliance between the Sinsings and the Hans of New York. I became impassioned, culminating, I believe, with a vow to proceed single-handed against the hereditary enemies of our race. If the Wyomings were blindly set on placing a gang feud ahead of honor and duty and the hopes of all America. As I concluded, a great calm came over me, as one detached. I had felt much the same way during several crises in the First World War. I gazed from face to face, striving to read their expressions, and in a mood to make good my threat without any further heroics, if the decision was against me. But it was Hart who sensed the temper of the council more quickly than I did, and looked beyond it into the future. He arose from the tree trunk on which he had been sitting. That settles it, he said, looking around the ring. I have felt this thing coming on for some time now. I'm sure the council agrees with me that there is among us a man more capable than I to boss the Wyoming gang, despite this handicap of having had all too short a time in which to familiarize himself with our modern ways and facilities. Whatever I can do to support his effective leadership at any cost, I pledge myself to do. As he concluded, he advanced to where I stood, and taking from his head the green-crested helmet that constituted his badge of office, to my surprise, he placed it in my mechanically extended hand. The roar of approval that went up from the council members left me dazed. Somebody ultrophoned the news to the rest of the gang, and even though the ear flaps of my helmet were turned up, I could hear the cheers with which my invisible followers greeted me. From near and distant hillsides, camps, and plants. My first move was to make sure that the phone boss, in communicating this news to the members of the gang, had not rebroadcast my talk, nor mention my plan of shifting the attack from the Bad Bloods to the Sing Sings. I was relieved by his assurance that he had not, for it would have wrecked the whole plan. Everything depended upon our ability to surprise the Sing Sings. So I pledged the council and my companions to secrecy and allowed it to be believed that we were about to take to the air and the trees against the Bad Bloods. That outfit must have been badly scared. The way they were burning the ether with ultraphone alibis and propaganda for the benefit of the more distant gangs. It was their old gang. And the only method by which they had avoided extermination long ago from their immediate neighbors. These appeals of the spirit of American brotherhood addressed to gangs too far away to have had the sort of experience with them that had fallen to our lot. I chuckled. Here was another good reason for the shift in my plans. Were we actually to undertake the exterminations of the Bad Bloods at once, it would have been a hard job to convince some of the gangs that we had not been precipitated and unjustified. Jealousies and prejudices existed. There were gangs which would give the benefit of the doubt to the Bad Bloods rather than to ourselves, and the issue was now hopelessly beclouded with the clever lies that were being broadcast in an unceasing stream. But the extermination of the Sensings would be another thing. In the first place, there would be no warning of our action until it was all over, I hoped. In the second place, we would have indisputable proof in the form of their rep ray ships and other paraphernalia of their traffic with the Hans, and the state of American prejudice at the time of which I write held trafficking with the Hans a far more heinous thing than even a vicious gang feud. I called an executive session of the council at once. I wanted to inventory our military resources. I had created a new office on the spot, that of control boss, and appointed Ned Garland to the post, turning over his former responsibility as plant's boss to his assistant. I needed someone, I felt, to tie in the records of the various functional activities of the campaign and take over from me the task of keeping the records of them up to the minute. I received reports from the bosses of the ultraphone unit and, uh, and those of food, transportation, fighting gear, chemistry, electronic activity, and electrophone intelligence, ultrascopes, air patrol, and contact guard. My ideas for the campaign, of course, were somewhat tinged with my 20th century experience, and I found myself faced with the task of working out a staff organization that was a composite of the best and most easily applied principles of business and military efficiency, as I knew them from the viewpoint of immediate practicality. What I wanted was an organization that would be specialized functionally, not as that indicated above, but from the angles of intelligence as to the Sensing's activities, intelligence as to Han activities, perfection of communication with my own units, cooperation of field command, and perfect mobilization of emergency supplies and resources. It took several hours of hard work with the council to map out the plan. First, we assigned functional experts and equipment to each division in accordance with its needs. Then these, in turn, were reassigned by the new division bosses to the field commands as needed, or as independent or headquarters units. The two intelligence divisions were named the White and the Yellow, indicating that one specialized on the American enemy and the other on the Mongolians. The division in charge of our own communications, the assignment of ultraphone frequencies and strengths, and the maintenance of operators and equipment I called communications. I named Bill Hearn to the post of field boss, in charge of the main or undetached fighting units, and to the resources division. I assigned all responsibility for what few aircraft we had, and all transportation and supply problems I assigned to resources. The functional bosses stayed with this division. We finally completed our organization with the assignment of liaison representatives among the various divisions as needed.